All right, everyone. Hello and welcome into what I would like to call phase 2 of the Minnesota Vikings head coaching search, because they are going to be spending a better portion of this week conducting second interviews with their final four preferred candidates. At least I think it's a final four based on everything that I have seen, all of the reporting that has gone on this morning, and the public schedules that we do currently know about. So the goal of today's video is going to be to identify those final four candidates, talk about some pros and cons in terms of timeline, and ultimately where we go from here. And then, of course, if you want to tell me who you would like to see hired as the next head coach of the Minnesota Vikings out of this final four list, let me know in the comments below and why. And it feels kind of ironic that we're doing this today, as currently, as of this recording, the Chicago Bears are conducting their press conference to introduce their new GM Ryan Poles and their new head coach Matt Eberflus. And I think the newsiest part of the day was that they're deciding that they're going to switch from a 3-4 defense to a 4-3. So I don't know. It feels like the Bears getting all of this out of the way and doing everything right now. It feels like maybe we're kind of taking this a little bit slower than I would like. But as I've said before, I am happy with the progress that we have made. I'm very satisfied with this final four list of candidates. And I want to preface this video by saying, whoever we hire from this final four list, if it is from this final four list, I'm going to be pretty happy with it. I think they have whittled this down to a solid, a rock solid final four, if you will, if I could get my words out. So let's go over everything and talk about who these guys are and where we go from here. So before we get into the finalists, there is a potential fifth finalist that I'm currently unsure of because no second interview has been scheduled. So he is kind of up in the air as of right now. And it felt like his initial interview over the weekend was sort of overshadowed by all of the Jim Harbaugh news. But we do have to talk about defensive coordinator for the New York Giants, Patrick Graham, because he was one of the candidates that was interviewed after Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah was hired and named the general manager of the Minnesota Vikings. So he did cast a little bit of a wider net, not all that much, because he's only one of two head coaching candidates that we have learned about for the vacancy post him being hired as the GM. But no second interview has been scheduled for Patrick Graham. And it sounds like that Brian Daboll, the new head coach of the New York Giants, is interested in keeping him on staff, has publicly said that he will keep him on staff if he is not offered the position of head coach for Minnesota or anywhere else. So it feels to me like the Patrick Graham situation might just be a security blanket type of deal, where if all of the final four candidates for their current vacancy sort of don't work out, or they get sniped by another team, or Jim Harbaugh decides to stay in Michigan, whatever the case may be, this is their fail-safe. They have a plan B. Patrick Graham would be the next head coach of the Vikings if these final four do not work out. So that is probably how I would view the situation with him. So we will keep him in mind, but the final four candidates for the Minnesota Vikings head coaching vacancy, at least according to the reports that I've seen and all of the second interviews that have been scheduled, are as follows. So we have DeMeco Ryans, the current defensive coordinator for the 49ers, Kevin O'Connell, the current OC for the Rams, Raheem Morris, the current defensive coordinator for the Rams, and Jim Harbaugh, the current head coach for the Michigan Wolverines. So let's begin with the Rams. Championship Sunday was yesterday. The Rams are moving on to the Super Bowl. The 49ers have been eliminated. It feels like that was the game that Vikings fans were paying the most attention to during Sunday, even though the Bengals and Chiefs put on a hell of a show. Go Bengals, Joe Burrow, Joe Shiesty, he is the man. The scheduled interviews for today are as follows. Kevin O'Connell and Raheem Morris, both of the Rams. The Minnesota Vikings are flying out to Los Angeles today to conduct those interviews this evening and tonight. And it makes sense to do that now, because if Kevin O'Connell or Raheem Morris are going to be the next head coach of the Vikings, they're going to have to wait 2 weeks to make that announcement. So, and it also makes sense because for the next 2 weeks, they're going to be prepping for the biggest game of their lives, right? And you're probably going to want to knock out their availability to be interviewed right away, because I think over the course of the next 2 to 3 days, they're going to go into super prep mode where they're going to lock themselves in their offices and they're not coming out until they've figured out their likeliest formula to hoist the Lombardi Trophy. So this had to be done right now. They can't wait any longer if they wanted to get those two guys a second interview. So it makes sense to fly out to LA and do Kevin O'Connell and Raheem Morris back to back in one day. Perfect sense. 49ers defensive coordinator DeMeco Ryans has been eliminated from the playoffs. So that frees him up to sort of take any job he wants over the next few days. And it's also nice that he's in San Francisco, because if they finish up in LA today, they could hop back on a plane and then fly down to San Fran and interview DeMeco Ryans tomorrow or Wednesday. So I think likely by the latest, unless there's other things happening or they just completely fall in love with one of the Rams candidates, which they're going to have to keep a quiet lid on and probably do some under the table verbal agreement until the Super Bowl is over. They can have D'Amico Ryans interviewed by Wednesday, I would predict, at the latest. That brings us to the wild card, Jim Harbaugh, who hasn't had a formal interview yet, according to reports. I think Chad Graff of The Athletic said that Jim Harbaugh's discussion with with General Manager Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah about the vacancy was just that, simply a discussion, not a formal interview. So haven't really seen anything determined about a second interview for Jim Harbaugh. I would probably rank him as the fourth likeliest candidate to get the head coaching job. It seems right now that the coordinators for the 49ers and the Rams are the preferred choices. They're the top three. You could probably assemble them in any order that you please. Jim Harbaugh is the X factor. We really don't know what's going on. I've been following John U. Bacon on Twitter because it seems like he's the most plugged in guy to the Harbaugh camp and what could potentially be happening. I've seen rumors that he'll go back to Michigan. I've seen rumors that he could potentially be the next head coach of the Miami Dolphins. I'm not too aware of what the Dolphins vacancy situation is or who their preferred candidates in. I'm not plugged into Miami, so I don't really know much about them, but his name has been floated as a possibility for the next Dolphins coach. It seems like a very fluid situation right now with Jim Harbaugh. Jim Harbaugh probably represents, if you're a fan who is dying for a Super Bowl and you want it to happen and you don't want to rebuild and you want success right now, but you're only going to get success for the next 4 to 5 years, that would be the trade-off. Jim Harbaugh is likely your preferred candidate. You can't argue the success that he's had at 3 different stops, 2 times in college, 1 in the professionals, with Stanford, then the Niners, and now Michigan. So everywhere he's gone, he's reached the promised land or at least gotten close. So it's hard to argue against anybody who wants a Super Bowl right now and is willing to, go through a 4 to 5 year window and, come out the other side. Who knows what happens after that to the franchise. I have always been of the mindset that one Super Bowl for me is good, and then after that, I don't care. Because just getting the first one out of the way seems like the real pickle, that we can't get over the hump and just get the first one and then just break the curse, if you will. Not that I think that there's a curse, but it's Minnesota sports. There might as well be. And so after that, I probably wouldn't care. So I would probably, just sort of throw the future of the organization to the wolves and not give a damn about what happens to this team after the first Super Bowl. I'd still root for them, still be a huge fan, and still do this. But at the same time, it's like you got the one championship under your belt. Everything after that is just bonus points. Or you could look at the coordinator situation that they have with the top 3 in D'Amico Ryans, Kevin O'Connell, and Raheem Morris, and potentially find yourself in a situation where you have long-term sustained success, where you can achieve multiple championships potentially, because the Will family has always been, of the mindset they're trying to find the next Mike Tomlin, even though they had the first Mike Tomlin and let him go. They're looking for sustained success. They're looking at that Pittsburgh Steelers model and wondering how they can achieve that. D'Amico Ryans feels like the closest thing you could potentially get to a Mike Tomlin, sort of came up through the system the same way. I've sort of compared him more so to Mike Vrabel. Mike Vrabel hasn't had the Super Bowl yet, but he's had some pretty good success with the rosters that he's had in Tennessee. Kevin O'Connell represents probably the next piece of the Sean McVay tree that could be very successful long-term. I remember criticizing wildly and to a heavy extent the Zach Taylor hire in Cincinnati a few years ago, and I have egg on my face today because the Bengals are in the Super Bowl. Zach Taylor was the quarterback's coach for the Rams under Sean McVay, hadn't done anything else that I can remember was of any significance in terms of coaching, and then boom, lands the head coaching job for Cincinnati, and I was just like, well, that's a terrible hire. They're never going to go anywhere. And then they tank, Joe Burrow falls into their lap, and the rest is history. So maybe a guy like Kevin O'Connell wouldn't be that bad of an idea coming from the Sean McVay tree. And then there's Raheem Morris, who a lot of people are going to point to his failures as a head coach in Tampa Bay 10, 11 years ago, but that team 10, 11 years ago wasn't very good. And I have been sort of the mindset lately that, head coaches that have had first chances that didn't work out deserve a second chance, because if you look around the league, there's been second chance coaches that have gone on to win a Super Bowl. I mentioned Pete Carroll, I mentioned Bill Belichick, Andy Reid. There's another one whose name escapes me currently right now that I don't remember, but sometimes a second opportunity for a head coach isn't a bad idea, and they could be the one that leads you to the promised land. I think I made the same argument for Jim Harbaugh, considering that he had success with the 49ers, but ultimately didn't win the Lombardi Trophy. So that's currently where we stand. those are your head coach finalists, and we have a lot to really think about and ponder as they make their final decision. And I think the final decision is going to say a lot about what this team's direction is going to be over the next 4 to 5, maybe even 8 to 10 years. So Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's contract is only 4 years long. The fact that they could potentially hire Jim Harbaugh, who's going to command a huge salary and basically job security in terms of length of contract. I'm thinking like maybe somewhere around the John Gruden thing that Las Vegas gave him. It was like a $10 million, $100 million contract. I don't think he gets that in Minnesota. So I don't know. I'm hesitant to believe that Jim Harbaugh is going to be the guy, but I've been proven wrong before. So I think it's going to come down to one of the three coordinators. And then the only thing that stinks about, if your priorities or your favorites are on the Rams staff, you're going to have to wait 2 weeks for that hire to be made official because they can't announce it, they can't negotiate it until the Rams are either eliminated or win the Super Bowl. So that's where we currently stand. Let me know what you think in the comments below. That's going to do it for me. Thank you very much again for watching. I'll see you in the next one.